Let's start talking about the trade talks, because there are going to be certain quarters that no matter what happens, they're not going to say Trump cut a good deal. But at this point, he's facing some pressure from some people who have really backed him pretty soundly in the past. China hawks who worry that there's going to be too much given away. I was reading there was one AEI scholar who was saying this whole thing's a fraud because of how the process has taken place. And then Steve Bannon making some comments where he says Wall Street's convincing Trump that he needs a win, and that's the insidious nature of this. What do you think about the talks at this point, what he faces, and what the right move is?
Well, listen, I think the right move is for him to get the best deal he thinks he can get at this time. This is not going to end it. It's not going to end what our continued kind of contentious trade relationship with China. It's going to just bring the temperature down, I suspect. And I think that will satisfy the markets well enough. And the president will continue to be confrontational towards China. But what he learned, I think, at the summit in Vietnam was that, the cross currents in all this are very important. He needs China to help him with North Korea. And if he continues to have a complete stalemate with China on trade, China's not going to help him with North Korea. And I think part of the conversations going on in the background are, all right, we're going to take this next step on trade and, improve things a bit. But we also need your help with North Korea to move them along, because that's the bigger deal the president cares about, is what happens with North Korea. From a political perspective, Becky, North Korea is going to be more important to the president politically than an incremental improvement in a China trade deal beyond where he might be now.
Is he right to think that, or has he misjudged that? Should he be prioritizing China more than he is North Korea?
No, I think that, in the election context in 2020, as long as he doesn't have a complete blow up with China, right? You can't. Then the markets will crater to a large degree, and then he'll have big economic problems. But I think if he gets a trade deal that satisfies some of the people and continues to move it along and say, we got more to do, and that helps to bring China along to help put pressure on North Korea to show some type of concrete accomplishment with North Korea, even if it's not denuclearization, but it's something that's concrete and can be signed and proven, then I think he's got a twofer. And that's what he's really going for, I think, is those.
I was with Steve Schwarzman on Friday and asked him about what he sees happening, because obviously he's close to the Chinese,
Yep.
also an advisor to the president. His point is that China was disappointed by those talks falling apart with the North Koreans, too, just because he says China doesn't want a nuclear power on its doorstep either.
Yeah.
So how do you why would the Chinese not be helping us at this point?
Well, because they want to get a better trade deal.
So they're looking at it from
listen, are we shocked that the Chinese are using leverage? Right? I mean, the Chinese are leveraging this. And this is one of the things where, when I talk about in the book about some of the inexperienced people the president had around him in the beginning, he doesn't have that problem now. When you have people like Pompeo and Kudlow and Lighthizer and others, although Lighthizer's been there from the beginning, they understand these cross currents. Bolton understands these cross currents. And that's what you have to play with. You have to play with how much do you need to give them on trade to get them really engaged on the North Korean issue, because we know that China's the only thing that's keeping North Korea afloat, right. Given how powerful the sanctions have been and how united the United States has led the rest of the world in the sanctions against North Korea.
On trade overall, if the China deal is closed off soon and therefore is the sort of shape that we were just talking about, add that to USMCA, does that all play very successfully in 2020?
I got to say NAFTA. It took me 3 minutes to figure out what you were saying with USMCA. I still don't call it that. The new NAFTA.
He's trying to help the president out by calling it USMCA.
But all of that together, can his critics hit him for not being enough or not? Does he win on that topic?
Well, his critics will hit him, but I don't think the American people will buy it as long as the economy continues to chug along. They're going to say he promised better trade deals and he got better trade deals. Now, you'll have some people argue, Becky, as you talked about in the lead-in, that, not good enough. Right. But better than where we were before, and that's what he promised to do. Then I think he's going to be able, the next challenge, as you know, is going to be dealing with Europe. Because, where Brexit ends up and how all that plays out and what role the U.S. is going to play with Europe. If he has NAFTA done, if he has a decent deal with China that he's going to continue to try to improve upon, then his trade focus is going to have to be on Europe.
Governor, you mentioned that he has people who are more experienced around him now. I think the question is, does he listen to them? If they're telling him something that he doesn't agree with, I think everybody figures whatever Donald Trump decides is what's going to happen. It doesn't matter what anybody else says. He may listen to people on left and right, but I do think more than just about anybody else, he's the decider, right?
Well, he is the decider, but that's no different than Barack Obama or George W. Bush. And George W. Bush was the one who kind of coined that phrase, right? I'm the decider. The president's always the decider. But I do think on trade, it's one of those areas where he has more definite opinions than he has in almost any other area that he covers as president. He's been talking about these things since the 80s, as you know. And so he's got some very definite opinions, and the people he has surrounded himself with tend to reinforce those opinions.
Not Kudlow. I mean, I think of
Well,
there
except
being
for
two,
Kudlow.
kind of like two camps on trade. Those who are saying make a deal and those who are saying, yeah, forget it, this is not tough enough.
Well, but I think Kudlow is kind of alone in terms of on the trade team. When you've got folks like Wilbur Ross and Lighthizer and others, I think
Peter Navarro.
Right, Navarro. They've all been in one lane and in the president's lane. But I do think, again, the president's willing to make deals, right? So he didn't get everything he wanted out of the new NAFTA. He's not clearly going to get everything he wanted out of China, but he's going to be incrementally better. That's very much like he operated here in the city for all those years. Yeah. You know, he got the deals he got. It wasn't always what he wanted, even though he'll say it's exactly what he wanted. And that's part of the power of Donald Trump.
It's interesting because in that context, I mean, he hasn't for 20 and 30 years been talking about forced technology transfer and intellectual property protections in China. He's been talking about the trade deficit. He's been talking about they're getting our jobs, we're not. And so you could otherwise see a scenario in another presidency where in 2020 he can say 4% unemployment, everything's going really well, the stock market's up. These have North Korea and China, in a way, are wars of choice that he decided to put out in front of everybody and say, judge me by these things, right? So,
well, yes, but I think, one, it's because I think the trade deficit is kind of the representative rhetoric for all the other problems that we have with China as well. And the president speaks in very bold strokes, as we know, and broad strokes. And so he's not going to get into the nuance of that publicly. But I know that he understands it privately and understands what a problem that piece of it is. The other part of it for him is that, you know, believe me, if he's looking at 4% unemployment when he gets to 2020 and an economy that's going the way it's going, you're not going to hear about anything other than that. And he's going to say it's because of what I did with China. It's because of what I did with NAFTA. It's because of what I did on taxes and on deregulation. And I promised all those things. I delivered on all those things. That's why I'm the greatest president of the 21st century and beyond. And that's why you have to reelect me. That's what you'll hear from Donald Trump.
You know, we'll talk a little bit later about the 2020 campaign and who he's going to be running against, potentially. Governor Hickenlooper just announcing earlier this morning that he's going to be in. But you're somebody who has been close to him, who has been an advisor in the past, but you're also somebody who tends to pull no shots. So in this book, you say what you think. You said just now, look, he's going to go out and say he got everything he wanted, even though he didn't get everything he wanted, and that's part of the deal. Have you spoken with him since the book came out?
Yeah.
What does he say?
He says, you're nice to me.